Hello everyone, Eric Olsen from Helps YouTube on YouTube Live. Good to have you here today on August 11th, 2025. My name is Eric Olsen, attorney for 46 years now, founder of Helps. Helps is a national law firm who represents seniors and disabled persons who have a debt they can't afford to pay. And our most important message to seniors is that if your income is Social Security, pension, disability, VA benefits, that income is protected. It's available for your needs. It doesn't need to be used to pay a debt you can't afford to pay. If you can hear me, please let me know in the chat feature. It's always nice to know that I'm being heard. Okay. Um, Good to have you here. Um, I'm going to start out. The important thing about our channel is we give you correct information. There's just a lot of misinformation out there for seniors. They're not told the truth. There's almost a concerted effort by debt collectors and people that supposedly are supposed to help people with debts to keep that information away from them. So just before I got on here, I just Googled, help for seniors, and I just came up with this is an article on August 5th, just a few days ago. And I'll just share with you. This is a complete example how seniors are deceived by these companies. And it's really wrong. So let's see if I can get it up here. There it is. So this is Freedom Debt Relief, how to find debt relief for seniors. Let's look at what they say. Table of contents. We'll skip down there. Understanding debt relief. Uh, it can mean all kinds of strategies to manage debt. And these might include bankruptcy or credit counseling, and it can mean debt consolidation. That's what these guys do. They're probably for profit. And then the eligibility criteria for senior debt relief. Um, just talks about the size of debt, types of debt relief available, consolidate, work with credit counselor to get you on a budget, get help with family or friends, file for bankruptcy protection, settle your debts for less. Uh, See that what they said? Those are the types of debt relief. Okay. Um, did they say one thing about the fact that, hey, if you're a senior, you're getting Social Security, your pension and disability, or your pension and your Social Security income is protected, no one can take it? Did they mention that? No, they didn't mention that. No, let's go on. See what they say in this so-called website. It's supposed to help people. Debt consolidation. It can be especially helpful to those who are paying high interest. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Credit counseling. Okay. Bankruptcy. Um, it talks about bankruptcy, uh, debt settlement. What is freedom debt relief? And it talks about them and that how to choose the right debt relief program. Okay. Nowhere, nowhere, nowhere in this article that came out a few days ago does it ever mention to a senior, by the way, another option you have is you don't need to worry about the debt, that your income is protected. No one can touch your Social Security. No one can touch your pension. Okay. Instead, it steers people to sign them up with these companies that charge high fees. You're in them for I talked to someone this morning, and her husband had passed away just last month, and they've been paying like $300 a month for debt management for the last couple of years. I explained to her, I said, you can stop that. They had, I forget how much they owed in debt. It was like it was 20 or 20, at least 20,000 left over. You can stop that. Her income was only like $1,400 a month. And I said, you didn't need, when you signed up with these people, did they tell you, by the way, your income is protected? She said, no, Mr. Olsen, they never told us that. And now that she's a widow and her income has gone down because her husband passed away, She realized she can't continue with that $400 payment. She had a $700 house payment. The time she paid the $400 for this company, it left her a couple $100 for food and utilities and whatever she needed. Told her, I said, you don't need to pay that anymore. And, had no idea. And that's why these companies like this Freedom Debt Relief purposely hide this information from seniors. They don't tell them, they give them, they leave out the most critical information. So if you're signed up with a debt management or debt settlement company, and you're a senior getting Social Security, and they never told you this, you're being scammed by them. They're being fraudulent with you. One of the definitions of fraud is if you withhold critical information that's in someone's financial benefit for your financial benefit. And that's what they do. By withholding this information, people enroll with them, and they're keeping away this information. It's really sad. Okay. Um, so LC says, how do we know the rules of protection will be dismantled with all the recent changes? Nothing feels protected. These rules aren't going anywhere. No way. That's the last thing you need to worry about. The rules protecting Social Security have been in effect since 1935. They'll be here in the next 100 years. There's no way. Your Social Security is not going to be taken away. In fact, if anything, the protections have increased over time. In 2012, a rule went in, came into effect that told banks, hey, if you get a garnishment on your bank account, you have to examine the bank account. And if federal monies went in there, like Social Security or a federal pension or VA benefit, Social Security, you take that sum times two, the amount they get each month times two, and you automatically protect that from garnishment. And so a bank can, if someone sued you, got a writ of, and they found out, and they got a judgment, and they filed a writ of garnishment on your bank account, there's a department in your bank that will examine your account, and they can tell by the code on the deposit where it came from. And they take that, if it came from a federal source like Social Security, they times that times two, and they automatically protect that from garnishment without you having to do anything at all. Now, if you had more than that in there, it's still protected, just not automatically. So no, they're not going to take money out of your account. Now, if you talk to your bank manager, he's not going to understand this rule, but there's a department of the bank that deals with this that does. Okay. So no, Social Security isn't going anywhere, and these bank protections aren't going to go anywhere. I can assure you that. Okay. Um, it's really, as far as I'm concerned, it's really not open for discussion. Some things just aren't meant to change, and that's one of them. Okay. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat feature. Good to have you here. Person calls in. This person writes in from Rhode Island. Recently, I got a charge off from Discover. In response, Synchrony Bank closed my Lowe's credit card. I've been paying on a regular basis. I'm now going to be working to get the same result. Okay. I'm upset at these decisions are made by a machine with no human intervention. What I would need initially is a cease and desist letter. I'm 72 years old and had a hardship that wiped out my savings. My only income is Social Security. So Discover charged off a debt, and then apparently Synchrony Bank closed out his Lowe's credit card. Now, Discover and Synchrony Bank don't have any relationship with each other. The reason his Lowe's credit card got closed isn't because he got a problem with Discover Bank. It's probably because he didn't pay the Lowe's credit card, or he had another credit card that was backed by Synchrony Bank. See, Synchrony Bank backs a lot of credit cards. And if you don't pay one Synchrony Bank card and it gets cut off, Synchrony Bank could very likely cut off any other card that they're backing for you from a different company. Okay. So like Synchrony Bank might back Lowe's, they might back Harbor Freight. Who knows? They probably have a dozen or more, probably more companies that they back the credit cards for. And so it may say this company or that company, but on the bottom it's Synchrony Bank. So if you don't pay one, Synchrony Bank will link that with any other card you have with Synchrony Bank and cut the other card off. Okay. Now, one thing that happens when you call helps, what we do is we represent we represent you under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which is a law that was passed in 1978 that provides if you're represented by an attorney, collectors have to leave you alone. People find out about helps, they call us, we go over their situation. They may call us several times. They decide to enroll. You click a button, you can get enrolled immediately. Give us the name and address of the creditors you don't want to hear from anymore. We don't need them out. And then we send a cease and desist letter, and we represent you ongoing so you never have to deal with these collectors. They have to leave you alone. Now, when you talk to us, one of the questions we're going to ask you is, do you have a credit card with a small balance or nothing is owed that you still want to keep? And if the answer is yes, and a lot of people may have a credit card they want to keep, they're current on it, and it's not a big balance. You can keep that credit card as long as it's not backed by a bank with whom you have another credit card you're not going to pay. Okay? So it is possible to keep a credit card if you want when you enroll in helps. Okay, let's see here. Are we told by the bank if there's an attempt to garnish? Probably. You know, our clients aren't garnished that often. It's pretty rare. Um, some of the banks have a form letter that they will send saying, "Hey, there was a writ of garnishment. We sent a notice to this company that tried to garnish your bank account, let them know that all your funds were protected." So yeah, normally they'll let you know. Okay. Under this rule that was passed in 2012, if the bank gets a writ of garnishment on your bank account, they technically have 48 hours, 2 business days, to examine your account and determine if the money came in there from a federal source. Now, this rule's been in effect now for 13 years. Um, so it doesn't take very long. I tell people it takes 4 to 8 minutes for them to examine your account, see if it came from a protected source. So normally there's not a 48-hour holdup. Once in a while, we'll get a call on Monday, and someone will say, "Hey, my account has been garnished. I don't know what to do." And what's happened is they got the garnishment Friday, maybe Friday afternoon, and they didn't have time to release the funds, and so they were held over the weekend, and people are upset thinking they've been garnished. I tell them, be patient. By Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, the money will be released. I never get any calls back because the money gets released. Okay. Um, and then our whole purpose of helps is that, when you enroll in helps, you're a client literally forever. It's not just a one-time thing. Normally you go to an attorney and, he's your attorney, and then he gets a problem solved or it's over with, then he's not your attorney anymore. With helps, you're a client literally forever. So that, if we send a cease and desist letter out to a debt collector you owe money to, and maybe you might get a new letter from a different debt collector. They might sell it to a new different collector, and you're going to get a new letter 6 months, a year and a half down the road. And if that happens, you get a hold of helps, get us the letter, or get us the information. We're going to send a cease and desist letter out to that new debt collector so they leave you alone. If you happen to get sued, you're going to get us a copy of the lawsuit. We usually only need the first 2 or 3 pages. We're going to send a letter to the attorney who sued you, let him know that your income is protected. You're not going to do anything. And we're going to call you on the phone, explain why your income's protected, and send you emails that explain why your income's protected. They can get a judgment, but they can't collect from you. You don't need to worry. That's the whole purpose of helps. If you think you're being scammed, we want to hear from you, whether you're a member of helps or not. We'll talk to anyone that's a senior that are having these problems. Okay? So Richard asked, when a card is charged off, but you are up to date on another card with a related bank, if they cancel the good card, they're giving more incentive just not to pay even the good card. Well, that's true. Yeah, but I'm just telling my experience is if the card is backed by the same bank and you don't pay one card and you're current on the other one, they're going to cut the other one off. Now, there may be an exception, but usually not. Now, you say, well, gee, I'm current on that card. Why would they do that? Well, because you could run that card up more. Okay. And so their practice is to cut off any other card they back. Kel, Kelly, 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 I'll ask if you get a bill from a hospital from an out of state and you're under federal and state poverty level, can a cease and desist they're in Texas and I'm in Ohio. So it doesn't matter where you owe the debt or to whom you owe the debt. Okay. If you're getting Social Security or a pension, your pensions are protected under federal law called ERISA, Employment Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. Okay, that protects pensions. Okay, so your pension may not be protected under ERISA, but if it isn't, it's protected under a state law. So no one can take your Social Security or your pension, and it doesn't matter what state it is. Okay. Yeah. So Richard says, well, assuming the good card is maxed out yet. Yeah, we're both thinking about the same thing. Yeah, logically you would think, okay, if I'm the credit card company, well, that second card is maxed out. If I cut it off, he's going to stop making payments to me. Well, I don't know if the computer is that smart. We're both smarter than that, Richard, because I agree with you. You would think, if they realize, okay, if we cut this second card off that he's been making payments to, what's the incentive for him to keep making payments on that second card? Well, there isn't one, so they may be cooking their own goose. They may be cooking their own goose. But you can't reason with them. They have their rules. That's the way they are. So this person contacts us from Nebraska. Hello, I've just been diagnosed with something and will need surgery soon. My only income is Social Security. My question is, will I have to pay for part of the surgery? I have over $10,000 to pay on my credit card. I'll not be able to pay all my bills with this credit card debt. Can I not pay that credit card bill, or will I get sued? Please help. Kind of confused on what his question is, but let me. Sounds like he has a credit card that he owes a lot of money on that he's not going to be able to pay. Uh, and he said, if I don't pay this credit card, will I get sued? Well, you don't need to worry about getting sued. His only income is Social Security, and even if it was a pension. See, if you got sued and they got a judgment, they can't collect from you. You're what's called judgment proof. Okay, they can't take your Social Security. They can't take your pension. It's protected in your bank account. Even if you had equity in a home, they're not going to take your home. They're not going to take your car. Not going to take other assets. They get a judgment, but that's about the end of it. So yeah, you could stop paying the $10,000 in the credit card. And if you end up owing some money on the medical cost, you don't have to pay that either. Um, you're going to be fine. Okay. So this person contacts us from Missouri. They say, I have a consult for a bankruptcy attorney on Tuesday, but ran across your channel on YouTube. My concern is whether Social Security will remain exempt given the changes to all the federal programs going on now. I have included my phone number, but it's in the weekend, so I don't expect immediate help. I'm retired on Social Security only due to my health problems. I was on disability prior to transitioning to regular Social Security. Um, and then he says something else. Well, once again, like I explained a few minutes ago, um, this guy, you don't need bankruptcy. Before I started Helps, I probably filed 30 or 40,000 bankruptcies. My old firm is still in existence. It files more bankruptcy than any other law firm in the state where I practice. Okay, where I practiced. Um, And helps was started because seniors would come and I'd meet with them and I'd explain to them. For years, I tell them, hey, you don't need to file bankruptcy. Your income is protected. A lot of them couldn't afford to file bankruptcy. Bankruptcy became pretty pretty expensive after 2004, after 2008, 2004, and then after 2008 too. Became expensive, and they couldn't afford. And they didn't need to file bankruptcy. But I know if I sent them home, creditors could call and make their lives miserable. Well, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is the answer because under that law, if you're represented by an attorney, debt collectors can legally no longer call you or send demand letters anymore. They have to communicate with the attorney. They can still sue you, but it doesn't matter if you get sued. They can't collect from you, don't have to go to court. And so that's what helps. That's the reason helps was started. So we could specifically help seniors and persons that are disabled that get protected income like Social Security, disability, any type of pension. Okay. So they find out about us, they enroll. They can enroll immediately over the phone. Sometimes they'll call and talk to us 3 or 4 or 5 times before they decide to enroll. The cost is absolutely minimal. And 1 out of 6 or 7 of our clients get our help for free. We don't turn anyone away that qualifies for our service. And then we click a button, you're enrolled immediately. So you can be enrolled immediately. That means when we hang up the phone, if you get a call the next minute from a debt collector, you tell them, I'm represented by Helps. You give them our name and number, and you hang up the phone, tell them not to call you anymore. And then you're going to get us the name and address of the creditors or collectors that are bothering you. We're going to send them a cease and desist letter within 24 to 48 hours. And they're going to stop bothering you so peace comes back to your life. And then if you have a question ever, you call us on the phone so we can answer your question. We don't want you to worry. And so that's why Helps was founded, so that we could help seniors that owe debt to stop collectors from bothering. And like I started this program, this information that you're hearing from me is kind of kept away from seniors. That Freedom Debt Relief, that's just one example. Even the National Council on Aging, in their literature and in their videos, they tell people how they're a nonprofit organization. They're not affiliated with the government, but they get $50 million a year from the government. And one of their mission statement that they're there to help seniors, especially those that are struggling financially. Yet in their literature and in what they tell seniors, they don't tell seniors that their income is protected, that Social Security can't. No, they steer them toward debt management or debt settlement. So even a company like this that's supposedly supposed to be doing a lot of good withholds the information seniors deserve to hear. And that is that your Social Security, your pension, your disability, this income is protected. Okay? Doesn't need to be used to pay a debt you can't afford to pay. Okay? But now, if you're listening to me, you know that, and I want you to share that with other seniors as appropriate. We have a lot of clients that call us, and how did you find out about us? Well, someone told me about you. I mean, even if this isn't for you, it may be for someone else that you know. Okay. Mary says, I noticed the hold on my deposit. Okay, let's go on. Okay. So this person contacts us from Hawaii. Her name is a Hawaiian name. I won't say it, but it ends with Hallelujah, something like that. Hallelujah. I am a Helps member. I've just received a summons hand delivered to me. I will fax the summons documents to you. Please look over and let me know what I should do. I really appreciate your help. Thank you very much. Okay. So, yeah, when you enroll in Helps, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be sued. I think it's less likely you would be sued. Why is that? Because we send a letter to the creditor who you owe money to, let him know that your income is protected. Why would they sue you? They're not going to get anything from you, and the gig's up. They know you know your rights. So when this person from Hawaii sends us the summons, we're going to ask that she only send us the first 2 or 3 pages. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 or 10, 12 pages. All we need is the name, the case name, and the attorney's name and address. And then we're going to send a letter to that attorney letting them know that you're on Social Security or a pension. Your income's protected. You can't afford to pay the debt. We understand they're going to get a judgment. Remind them about the protected nature of your bank account, but we don't even need to do that because your bank itself does that. They know that. And then, we'll send a letter to that attorney. We're going to call you on the phone, explain to you again why you don't need to worry. Send you an email, explain how your income is protected. And if you later get a default judgment, you can get that to us, but we'll explain again to you why you don't need to worry. Okay? That's what we do. Now, does that mean if you don't pay the debt that you're going to get sued? Not necessarily. I used to give a percentage that people get sued. I don't do that anymore because percentage I gave was pretty low, and if someone had more than that, then they get upset saying, well, you said it was only this amount. But it doesn't matter. I tell sometimes it doesn't matter if you get sued by 100 different creditors. They can't collect from you. Your income's protected. You're going to be okay. You shouldn't have to go to court either. Okay? Okay. This person contacts us from Kansas. It says he had cancer 2 years ago. I'm still paying on non-Medicare bills. So Medicare paid for some of his treatment, but some of it not. Um, I have a problem with a junk buyer on a credit card debt. Got served with papers yesterday. I've been on Social Security for 8 years now. Is my savings account in trouble besides our two bank accounts, which receive direct deposits from the Social Security? Yeah, you're safe. We tell people if you get sued, you should only have one bank account, and that's the account to which your Social Security is deposited, because that's the account that's protected automatically. And usually that's the checking account. So if you put some of your Social Security money into a savings account and they garnish your bank, yeah, they protect the checking account, but not the savings account. Now, you could probably get that money released by filing what's called a claim of exemption or challenge of garnishment with the court, but that's a hassle and a headache. So you get such a small amount of interest on a savings account, it just might make sense just to not have anything in the savings account. Okay. Now you don't even need to worry about any of this stuff unless you're sued. I don't care if you got 20 different bank accounts. As long as you haven't been sued, you don't need to worry. See, for them to take money out of your bank account for it to be at risk, they'd have to sue and get a judgment. Now, when you get sued, that doesn't mean they could start taking the money out immediately. No, they'd have to wait and get a judgment, and that could be 30, 60, 90, 120 days away, probably longer. Okay? Give you plenty of time to get your banking arrangements sorted out so you've got it in a protected bank account. Okay? So this person contacts us from Missouri and they say, I'm a retired federal employee, 76 years old. He owes the IRS and he's been paying them about $250 a month. And in the past, he says, I've co-signed on loans for my daughter. He says, one only told me that I wasn't co-signed on, it's on my credit report. And I allowed my daughter to use my name for another credit card. It says that she's not paying. And he says he filed bankruptcy a few years ago. His daughter did too. He says I went to an attorney and he said to stop paying as they can't touch your pension or your Social Security, right? Attorney gave you correct information. Problem came because I was trying to buy a house with my other daughter. Discovered all the issues on my credit. Please let me know. how much of the fees are to join your organization. Thank you. You know, we do have a program for our clients that have been part of Helps for 90 days called 7 Steps to a 720 Credit Score. I've been promising to get Phil Tyrone on here again, and I will do that. I just forget. And we can talk about this program, but you can rebuild your credit. Your credit is based on your recent credit history. So if you have old credit that's old, when it's written off, you know, they base your credit on your recent credit history. And if you're a member of Helps for at least 90 days, we can enroll you in that program. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, but you can rebuild your credit up without having to pay the old debt. Um, are we alerted anyway if there is a garnishment? Not ahead of time. It just comes out of the blue. If they alerted you ahead of time, you'd take your money out of your account before they could take it. So no, it just happens. But it's not going to happen unless, number one, they sue you and they get a judgment and then they know where you bank. Now, if they sue and get a judgment, does that mean automatically you're going to be garnished? Probably not. I mean, it could, but they'd have to know where you bank. And there's not a place they can go to find out automatically where a person's bank, unless you've been there a long time. But once again, if you keep the balance in there less than twice the amount of what you get in federal benefits, that sum is going to be protected, even if some of the money in the account came from a different source. So if you got 1,500 in Social Security times 2 is 3,000, that sum is protected in the bank from garnishment. Even if some of the money was deposited from a completely different source that didn't come from protected monies, maybe a gift, something you sold, you know, as long as the balance is less than twice the amount that you get each month in Social Security, your bank will protect that. Okay. Ann asks, if someone gets a judgment, does that stay on your credit report? Actually, since about 2018, judgments don't appear on credit reports anymore. Okay, now why is that? Nor do lawsuits. And I've explained this before, but that's what we do on Helps YouTube Live. Sometimes we talk about the same things, which is okay. What happened is that the credit bureaus were getting sued because people were having loans and they were getting denied loans because the credit report said that there was judgments against them, when in fact they had paid that judgment maybe a year, 2 years before, and it had been cleaned up for whatever reason on the credit report. And so they were being denied for a loan, and maybe they'd have to reapply, and the interest rate would go up. So they were suing the bank, they were suing the credit bureaus. And so the credit bureaus made a decision: we're not going to report lawsuits or judgments anymore, or we're not going to report tax liens either. We're just going to report what people tell us. That way, if we get sued, then we can pass it off to whoever told us the wrong information. So no, the judgment shouldn't be on your credit report, or the lawsuit either. So this person contacts us. I met with an attorney yesterday for filing bankruptcy, and he advised me to contact you guys. Us Helps. He also advised to stop paying any bills. Is it possible to set up a conference call with myself and a friend who has been helping me with finances? I had a stroke in January and I'm not driving and still healing. Yeah, we usually don't set up a conference call, in advance. You can call us at any time. We've got plenty of people here that help. You can always get through to someone. Now, if you can't get through to someone, we'll call you back. And yeah, we can do a conference call. Uh, uh, a lot of times I'll talk to seniors, or I'll talk to kids, and I'll say, well, why don't we get your mom and dad on the line together? And yeah, we can do that. I can push a button here and push a button there, and Pretty soon the three of us are talking together. You don't have to be in the same room. And if you've got a stroke, we know how to talk. We know what to talk. You know, I think we're really patient with our clients. We have clients with all kinds of different issues. We got clients that are in their 90s, their 80s, 70, 60, 50, 40, doesn't matter as long as you're getting protected income. We have clients that may have communication issues, that may not understand everything. It doesn't matter where you're at. We're going to try to help you. And it's not uncommon for us to suggest, if we get someone else on the phone, so the three of us are talking, we're happy to do that. We don't have to do that, but if that's going to help, we're willing to do that. So Angie says, I'm a member and want to ask what happens if one has a court date and doesn't show up? Would they set up another date and the debt company, not the original creditor? Has a letter from, well, okay. It matters what the court date is set for. If the court is for, if you've been sued, occasionally on the lawsuit there'll be a date and time. But if you read it carefully, that's only if you're going to contest the lawsuit. If you're not going to contest the lawsuit, then you don't need to go to that court hearing. Okay. But you call us if there's a court hearing and you're a member of HELPS, and you call us and talk to us, and we'll go over that. Get us a copy of it. We'll go over that with you, explain what you need to do. Very unlikely you're going to need to go to any court hearing. Okay. So this guy says, I read several weeks ago before I found you that someone's retirement and Social Security are immune from wage garnishment, but you clarified the laws behind it. You bet. Right. So Angie's saying Kaisa is one of our attorneys who's looking into it. Yeah, and if you're abroad, if you're in another country, I wouldn't worry about it. They're not going to come back to wherever you're at to do anything. You don't need to worry. Excuse me. I have been sued by LVND Funding for a credit card debt from Capital One Bank in the amount of about $1,600. That's what this guy's writing us. He says, I'm 79 years old and I live in Texas. My income comes from Social Security and the General Board of Pensions. Please let me know if you can help me and what your requirements to do so. Of course we can help you. His income is Social Security and a pension. It's protected. He's been sued. He's 79. He lives in Texas. Nothing to be worried about. If your enroll in helps, you give us the creditors you owe money to. We're going to get them a cease and desist letter so they're going to leave you alone. You're going to get us a copy of that lawsuit. We're going to send a letter to the attorney who sued you, let him know that your income is protected. We understand they're going to get a judgment. And, so you don't have to deal with these creditors. Now, you live in Texas. Different states have different rules. And in Texas, if they get a judgment, you might later get a notice. They might appoint what's called a court-appointed receiver. So Texas has got these guys that are kind of like, I don't know what to call them, trustees or collectors, but they have a title. They're a court-appointed receiver. And occasionally when one of our clients in Texas will get a letter from a receiver saying, I'm going to take everything you own, pretty much. And then in small print it says what the law allows. Okay. But in Texas has really broad protections. They can't take your home. 50,000 and other assets are protected. But the problem is if you got that letter and you didn't know your rights, you might be tempted to call that receiver, and he's not under obligation to tell you what you're protected. He just wants to try to make arrangements for you to make payments, and he gets a certain percentage of that. So, and other states have similar procedures. Florida, they've got what's called a fact information sheet where they can, if you get a judgment, they send you that and ask a bunch of questions. And you get scared when you get that letter thinking, oh my gosh, and you're tempted to call the attorney that sued you, the attorney isn't obligated to tell you your income's protected. He just wants you to make some payments. But that's what we do. We give seniors legal information so they know what their rights are, so they don't need to worry. So here this person contacts us from Washington. And this may be you. He says, we are in dire need of help. We are greatly in debt. My husband seems to have a problem and I have another problem. We just need help. Yeah. If you're that person, if you think you need help, call us on the phone and we'll go over this with you. You call us right now, 855-435-7787. I'm supposed to have a little script at the bottom here. I have to have a talk with my tech guy. I don't see it there. Maybe it'll be on there later. 855-435-7787. I don't want you to worry. You don't need to worry. You can give us a call whenever you want. Um, so Diane's saying, in New York City, a base amount is protected regardless of the source. The amount is $3,425. I know you don't want people to be aware of this. You're not so trustworthy either. I hope you're not talking about me, Diane. I don't have a perfect memory. There's a million different cities in this country, and there's 50 different states. I don't know every little detail, but certainly want let people to know what their rights are. And I'm not so sure that's the case, but I'll look into that and see, and I'll deal with that tomorrow. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So this person writes in, what happens if the judgment is a default judgment on your house? So if someone sues you and gets a judgment, and it's, you don't do anything, it's a default judgment. A default judgment is just a judgment. A judgment is a judgment is a judgment. Doesn't that matter what type of a judgment for money is a judgment for money, no matter what type of judgment it is. If you go to court and you lose, and there's a judgment for $1,000, it's the same as a judgment for $1,000 from default judgment. What a default judgment means, it's just a judgment. It's just a judgment. It's just a judgment for money. That's what it is. So is it a problem? Does it become a problem, a lien on your house is what you're asking? Is it attached to your house? Well, it kind of depends. In most states, a judgment can become a lien on real property that's dirt, a home on dirt that you own in the county where the judgment is located. Now, if you owned a piece of property in a different state or a different county in your state, the judgment wouldn't be a lien there. It'd only be a lien where the judgment's located. Now, it is possible for the judgment to be transferred or added to a different county or something like that, but and in some states, the judgment is meaningless. Like, for example, in California, if the home is worth if you got $700,000 equity, and if you've homesteaded the property, which most homes have been, then if you go to sell the home, the judgment doesn't apply. If you have a property in Texas or Florida, you can have the judgment lien removed. But yeah, judgment can become a lien on the home. But let's say you're married and the home is owned by the husband and wife, and the judgment just gets the husband. He predeceases the wife. When he dies, the judgment goes away because the judgment is only a lien on property that the person owns. And if you're dead and the property transfers to another person, then that judgment lien disappears because the person that died, they no longer own the property. And then there's a lot of ways for these judgments to be removed. The bottom line is they're not going to take your property. They don't. It's not the practice of consumer judgment creditors to go after property. See, almost every state has what's called homestead exemption. They have an amount of equity that's protected. But that usually only applies in bankruptcy. And uh, um, so if you have equity in your home over and above the exemption in the state where you live, does that mean that a creditor gets a judgment is going to come after your home? Answer is no. Is it theoretically possible? Yeah, it's theoretically possible. The Martians could come for dinner Friday night too, but we don't live our lives worried about that. They don't go after the equity in your home. They just don't do that for a lot of different reasons. Okay. So Harvey asks, do I have to answer a lawsuit from an original debt collector? I'm in Georgia. Well, if you dispute the debt, if you don't owe it, you can answer it and contest it. But if you don't and you get Social Security or a pension, your income's protected. No, you don't need to answer it. You don't need to answer a lawsuit. They can't collect from you. Let me look here. So what is considered the age that someone is a senior in terms of laws you talk of regarding wage garnishment? Is it 65? Well, as far as wage garnishment, it doesn't matter how old you are. Okay. If you're working, um, you know, there's a federal law that protects $217.50 net per week in wages from garnishment. It's $435 every 2 weeks, about $950 a month. Okay. And then some states don't allow garnishment, such as Texas. And then other states protect a much larger amount than that. But in every state, the minimum is 217.50 net. That's after taxes and withholdings. Okay. Is protected from garnishment. But a lot of our clients, they don't need to worry about a garnishment. One reason they're not working, and if they're working, a creditor doesn't know where they're working. So yeah, if there's a question on that, we're glad to talk to you and go over that. Okay. But as far as your qualifications to enroll in HELPS, it doesn't matter what age you are, as long as you're getting protected income, like Social Security or pension or disability. It's protected, doesn't matter how old you are. So Jimmy asks, if you ask a credit collector for a letter validating the debt, do you reset the time limits? Not really. In fact, they legally could still sue you if you ask for a you can't that won't delay them from filing a lawsuit. Some people think if I send that letter asking them to validate the debt, you can ask for that and they need to do that, but that doesn't prevent them from still suing you before the debt is validated. They can still technically do that. If experience says that the account is charged off, why is it still in report till 2030? Well, sometimes they report things on your credit report when they shouldn't. Now, if you're a member of HELPS and you're trying to, some of our clients want to clean up their credit. A lot of them don't care. But you can contact us. We can send you, if you've been part of HELPS for at least 90 days, we can send you a link to 7 steps to a 720 credit score, and you can enroll in that for free. And Phil can help you figure out how to clean up your credit report. Okay. So CK asks, is there a usual time that a creditor will attempt to garnish or lien after receiving a judgment? Well, a judgment is automatically a lien when it's entered. Okay. But as far as a garnishment, that's something where they have to file paperwork to take money from usually a bank account or whatever. Uh, and there is no time frame on that. Um, if they attempt to take money out of a bank account and it comes back that no, it's protected, they usually don't try again. Sometimes I think we have a form letter that we'll send sometimes to a creditor that attempted a garnishment when it was unsuccessful, and just reminds the judgment creditor, hey, you attempted this garnishment, but once again, this person's only income is Social Security. Is protected. Do whatever you want, but you're kind of wasting your time by trying to collect from this person. Once again, if you have any questions about this, you call and talk to us. Okay, that's what we're here for. We want to answer your questions. So this was a response to one of our videos. The guy says, this sounds promising, but with all the current changes at the federal level, I worry that assumed protections will also be dismantled. Don't need to worry about that. They're not going to get dismantled. I'll eat my hat if that happens. I'm not worried about having to eat my hat. The current protections that protect your income, your Social Security, your pension, just are not going anywhere. Fair Debt Collection Practice Act isn't going anywhere. That law has been enshrined in our laws. It's not going anywhere. Now, the only place where there's kind of like a flux is with student loans. And the administration, I think on May 5th, said they were going to start offsetting student loans, 15% of Social Security to pay for past due student loans. Well, a month later, they came back and said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're still looking at the problem. Okay. So even they're not taking money out for student loans. Now, what about taxes? Well, for years, the IRS has had the policy that, the most they would take would be 15% offset of your Social Security. Now, but even that's pretty rare. And if you're under a certain amount of income, $3,500 for a couple, $2,500 for a single person, you can probably qualify for what's called currently not collectible with the IRS, and they're not going to take anything out. But you call and talk to us. What's considered the age that someone's senior in terms regarding wage, and then I'm talking about the fact that seniors are immune to that. Okay, I think I answered the question. I hope I did anyway. This person writes in there saying, I'm being sued by PayPal. Someone took the debt out in his name. It's a note from one of our paralegals. He never made any reports, so he doesn't have documentation to prove it's not his. So apparently he got sued and he never did anything about it. Sounds like they got a judgment. But he says he doesn't want a judgment. Just the idea of it bothers him. Well, yeah, if you've been sued and it's not your debt and it was fraudulent, you're going to have to defend yourself. You're going to have to file an answer. But if you gave someone permission to use that credit card, you might have a more difficult time defending yourself. But if you decide to do nothing and your income, Social Security, or pension, and they get a judgment, they really can't do anything to collect from you. So anyway, he says he wants to give us a shot to see if we can drop it. We can't drop the lawsuit. Once in a while, when we send a letter to an attorney that sued someone of our clients, they'll just drop the lawsuit. But I can't give a percentage on that. Okay, I can't guarantee that's going to happen. It's by far the exception than the rule. The bottom line is if they get a judgment, your only income, Social Security or pension, doesn't matter. They can't collect from you. Don't need to worry about it. But apparently this guy didn't want to have to worry about it, so he decided to roll anyway. So this person contacts us from Texas. There's 66 that get $2,500 in Social Security. And he does get a private pension. He banks with a credit union, and he has a personal loan with them, but he wants to keep paying that for now. He owns a home outright and has 2 cars, both with title loans. So he lives in Texas. The entire equity in his home is protected, but he's got title loans on a couple cars. What's a title loan? It's where it's kind of high interest outfit. You give them their title and they hold the title. He says, I don't want the truck. It's a piece of crap. We can stop making the payment on it. Credit card and other personal debt. The lawsuit was filed recently. We read what we did, answered his questions, and enrolled him. So, yeah, he doesn't worry about the unsecured. Now, he's got one title loan he wants to keep. Yeah, if you want to keep the car, then you're going to need to pay that title loan. Now, maybe if you're not paying all these other debts, you can get that paid fast so you don't have to deal with that high interest. Once in a while, though, I'll talk with clients that have title loans on cars that they'll weigh more than what the car is worth. At some point, a title loan company isn't even going to try to repossess a car that's on a title loan. If it costs them money to repossess it, by the time they sell it, they won't get anything out of it. So you can talk to us about those issues and we'll go over it with you. Okay. We've got a couple more minutes to go. And I'll finish off with this one. Guy calls us from Colorado. He's 69 years old. He has a few credit cards. He paid off his student loan. And he's worried about a 1099-C. Ooh, I don't want to talk about 1099-C with 2 minutes to go. But it's possible you could get a notice saying a 1099-C, which means that supposedly means that if you don't pay a debt, that should be added into your tax return. Well, if you're only getting Social Security, you're not required to file tax returns. You don't need to worry about the 1099-C. But if you do file tax returns, and if your debts exceed your assets, you're insolvent generally, and there's a form you can file, 982, click the second box, insolvent, and there's no tax. But even if you did owe a tax and you have modest or lower income, you can get on currently not collectible status and not have to pay the tax. So basically, if you're getting a pension or Social Security, you're a senior. That's right. We've got people that are in their 30s that get Social Security disability. Now they're not seniors, but they're getting Social Security. It's protected. Okay. So it looks like we've come to the end of a day. We've got 3 more days this week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for Helps YouTube Live. If I haven't answered your question, please call us on the phone. Don't want you to worry. That's what Helps is here for, so that you don't have to worry. Everyone have a great day, and I will talk to you later. God bless. Bye.